Guten Tag, mein friends. This is a treatise on evolutionary history, or evolutionary history. The word biosphere was coined by the Austrian geologist Eduard Suess in 1831 to 1914, but it was the Russian geologist Vladimir Vernadsky, 1863 to 1945, who evidenced that the sphere of life has shaped planetary history, just as potent as the atmosphere, hydrosphere, and the lithosphere, the non-living spheres. In 1988 CE, Richard Lenski turned evolutionary biology into an experimental science, when chemistry and physics had the advantage of performing repeated experiments. Evolution provided the bridge from abiogenesis to the life on Earth today, the origins of life being the giver of all phase transitions. Like chemical reactions, life proceeds by converting free energy into disordered energy. But it is DNA that regulates and determines the interconnected reactions that defines a living organism. Once heritable genetic information is there, all the ingredients are available for natural selection to commence. Natural selection is a specific process. Organisms reproduce and give their genetic information to the following generations. Descent with inheritance and random variation in genetic information potentially and actually affect the likelihood of natural selection. The terms evolution and natural selection need to be defined due to their differences. Evolution is the change of the genome or the complete set of genetic information. Natural selection refers to something more specific in the sense that changes in the genome are in fact driven by different amounts of reproductive success. Charles Darwin did not actually know about DNA, for it was Gregor Mendel who first established the basic rules of heredity. But it was not until 1930 and 1950 that biologists developed the modern synthesis, i.e., the combination of natural selection with Mendel's genetics. Indeed, there are many different physical forces at work in the 4 billion year history of life on this planet, other than organisms merely adapting to their environments. Many features of the genome of any individual species, including the human species, are the factual results of accidents rather than any one particular set of adaptations. And this is known to scholars as genetic drift, but both are extremely pertinent. A single trait can in fact be brought to life by multiple but separate mutations whose individual impact is hardly noticeable. Selection pressures impacts traits while the genetic information is inherited through DNA. Evolutionary history is replete with byproducts of the evolutionary process rather than the actual aspects that are directly selected. In horizontal gene transfer, for example, genes are transferred from one organism to that of another, but not necessarily by means of actual reproduction. In epigenetic phenomena, the chemical structure of inherited DNA is modified by life and developmental influences in circumstantial environments of experience. The undirected mechanism is what there is to expect in a universe governed by laws of nature that do not think, and a strong arrow of deep time, sufficient to account for the spectacular intricacies of the biosphere, where the efficiency and ingenuity in biological organisms comes from the random variation in time, a process that led the first land dwellers to crawl into consciousness. Human primates then enter the biosphere. In the 20th century, the, quote, era of Homo sapiens sapiens, end quote, a single biological species, given the past 4 billion years, is the first to become the dominant force for change. Given that humans think better about the future than any other species to have ever roamed the earth, that we can reflect upon the past and in the present in anticipation for the future. And human language and the cooperative sharing of information allowed to them combine, change, and correct concepts via new information. Between the cosmological timescale and the human timescale, there is a scale of a few thousand years, and what happens during this time depends on what we humans will do. Humans have therefore arrived relatively late on this planet's biosphere, a few 100,000 years ago and are now beginning to change the biosphere more than the biosphere has changed them physically. Now, we have the ability of reason to share understanding. One tiny part of the universe is beginning to understand itself. Our modern story places all of human history within a much larger story of Earth history and that of the entire history of our universe. Our ancestors lived as foragers for the first 200,000 years or more in a diversity of environments until 10,000 years ago. At the end of the last ice age, at the last glacial maximum, humans existed in all the Earth's biomes. Humans were transformed by the invention of agricultural farming. The potential for life transformative innovations existed since collective learning. But now potential began to be realized due to an increased comprehension of difficult environments. Agriculture provided, in fact, most of the material resources necessary for the first agrarian civilizations that have dominated the past 5,000 years of human history, where favorable and relatively peaceful conditions accumulated, preparing the way for the innovations of humankind that would create today the Anthropocene.